encounter a homosexual, and it's like, oh my God, I'm a homosexual, so where's my sexual education writing? And so this is kind of what I wanted to get at, is this community involvement, this art project that is overall just implementing this idea, hey, we need to get our crap together. We need to make better sex education programs that include everybody, so that we have accurate information that provide an understanding towards people and also implement a safety net so people are comfortable having this kind of conversations. My future plans is to collaborate with more artists. I did have a friend that helped me create some of the music for this. However, I did write all of the lyrics. So that is my future plans going forward, is to have more collaborations with the community about sex education. Thank you.
So Sage, this is not an issue that's just limited to Utah. It's an issue that many Christian sects deal with, including one of the biggest, which is Catholicism. So my question is, do you plan on taking this on the road somehow to a larger audience? You talked a little bit about that, but specifically, have you thought about how to widen your education through your visual and animation?
Yes, so that is actually a very good point. So sex education, they are actually programs that have been funded for a very long time. And they keep rebranding. Like, they used to just say, don't have sex till marriage, and now they say, well, just don't have sex because it's really smart. And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't really work out for everybody. So the idea, yes, it would be, I guess, I would like it to be a traveling show, and I would like to showcase it in different states where sex education isn't necessarily talked about. But for now, since I kind of have my foot in the soil in Utah, I kind of want to use my artwork to kind of heal this really terrible perspective that we have on sex education in this state. So for now, I would just say my main focus is to create this growing community involvement for sex education programs where you can actually have conversations about consent and things that are actually around sexual intercourse and such. But yes, I do plan on proceeding to other states.
So I think we thought a lot about the audience and context. You began your presentation specifically addressing context and culture. So it's interesting to hear your response in terms of what audience is this for and where do you see it going. I also have a question about collaboration. Can you talk a lot more about collaboration and if it's easier to tackle taboos with collaborators, or what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, yeah, so my collaborative process was with a good friend of mine. His name's Tony Herrera. He's a Snow College music major. I strongly recommend collaborating with music majors on campus. One, because they stay on campus as long as everybody else, all the art majors do. So it's a really good way to build those relationships. And if I want to go into a professional animation studio, I'm going to be collaborating with musical artists and other artists as well. So collaborations are very beneficial. In terms of my process, there was points of it that got a little tricky or weird. And I think it was just because of the lack of description that he had given to somebody. But there was a certain part where I guess his girlfriend had thought that it was a really promiscuous thing that I was doing, writing about masturbation and writing about the LGBTQ plus community, and she thought I was trying to ruin that relationship. However, that wasn't the case, and it was a communication, lack of communication. So, of course, there's like weird communication that comes with these kind of taboo pieces, but in terms of like the musical work, it was really awesome. Like I said, I made the lyrics, and then I actually did help evolve the sound to kind of how I wanted it to be perceived as. But collaborating with someone, it was truly such a cool experience, and I hope to do that in the future. So yeah.
Okay, I have two questions. The first one is, you talk about these conversations in your animation being conversations that you would like to have with your mother. And I wonder if, or how, making this work has helped that conversation be had with you and others, or if you've had any feedback from people around who have seen this show, if it's helped start those conversations, and how.
Yes, so actually I did have a conversation with my mother about this experience that I had where I was sexually harassed on campus. And I think this show ultimately kind of made me open up a bit more to her, and she was really receptive towards it. So I feel like my relationship has evolved to it. She hasn't really seen my artwork, but most of my family support system doesn't really see my artwork just because I'm really secretive with my artwork, which, you know, that could be a really big pitfall later on in my life. But I feel like there's times where you can show your artwork to people, and sometimes you have to wait for it to find its place. In terms of other people, I had a lot of private showings just because of how COVID went, which I thought was really awesome to do in general, just because I really got to understand a person's perspective. And they had always wished that there was a program that had more of a dialogue conversation, rather those really framed out sex education conversations that no one would ever have with their parents. So I feel like these conversations are a little bit more easy to process, and with the people that did see the private showings of my exhibition, they actually wanted to have a better conversation with their parents about their sexuality, because sexuality is something that revolves around sex education. It's just not often talked about or brought up with parents.
Yeah. Okay, and then my other question really quick was, you know, you're using art as education tool, right? And so as an artist, you're now putting that other foot into education, and I'm curious, I mean, the research that you mentioned briefly, how do you plan to incorporate that more into your practice to, you know, to be that evidence, to be that, to back up the work that you're making?
Sure, yeah. So I plan on being an educator. I plan on getting a degree in education, hopefully, just because I think that art is a really good step into educating people, just because it's amazing what you can bring across the table visually, or just through experience. I think that that's something that's very awesome. In terms of, I guess, wait, there was like a two-parter to
Yeah,
that
sorry.
question. Sorry.
I'm just wondering, like, you have this research. I'm wondering how you plan to incorporate that even more to back up the work that you've seen, because I'm sure a lot of people would just dismiss this right away, right? Because of the taboo nature, and you know, for some people this would just they'd shut down.
Yeah.
But what you're saying is you're finding research. How are you going to disperse that research, that knowledge, so this is not just art, but actually remains education?
Okay, yes. So I guess how I would do that is just making more pieces that kind of explain the history. I think history is a huge part of making a change. So once you acknowledge something that was terrible, that happened in history, say for example, the licked cupcake parable, that's terrible. Your body should never be compared to a used object, and I'm so sorry for anybody that has ever experienced that. But in terms of it going about and changing it, you have to acknowledge the really bad parts of history. And there are really bad parts of sexual history that exists. For example, masturbation wasn't really dismissed by the Christian church or Cathology. Originally, it was this, I guess it was this physician that published this paper anonymously, because back then people really wanted their publications out there. So he made this publication, or I'm assuming they did, because it was anonymous, about how masturbation makes you blind, you know, your hands, they grow hairy and stuff like that. And those kind of that publication in specific branded 200 years of just poor sexual education information that has nothing to do with health, you know. And it's still relevant today. People think that masturbation is really unhealthy, but in fact it is actually very healthy and implemented in healthy relationships with people's partners. So I would just say acknowledgement of history and making those history into art projects so that it's more, people are a little bit more receptive towards art projects than reading a history book, which is really unfortunate. But it's fortunate for me because I can make a historical art piece for people to watch.
So Sage, why engage in the argument though? Why not just make a statement?
Why not just make a statement?
Because then you're not turning away the people that you're offending at the time. Why not just make a statement? You got that.
I would say, I don't know, I guess I could make a statement, but I don't really like art pieces that make a statement. I like art pieces that engage with people. I don't want to turn people away. I don't want other people to think that I'm against their views. I want people to have an open conversation and discussion.
But then you're preaching just like the other things you're teaching not to do. You know what I mean? So you've got this lady that preaches about the technique. Why preach your doctrine almost like you did, professing that other person did?
Well, it's not that I'm preaching. I'm having an open conversation with people about sexual education. So I guess I would say I'm just trying to engage people to have these conversations so there is this net of safety and understanding. I'm not necessarily preaching something that I believe. If someone would like to come have a conversation, talk about how they think that abstinence is the way to go, I'm all for it. But I just want my artwork to exist as a conversation for people to have those conversations with people. Does that answer your question?
Kind of.
Okay.
I think it's just kind of going on